There is a news story that is out from Memory. Memory is a great organization that translates all of the stuff on Saudi Arabian, Qatar, and all Arabic-speaking channels, because they don't say the same things in Arabic that they will in English. But I want you to be very well aware of what is being said there. There is just an interview that happened on Al Arabia. It's a network from Saudi Arabia, and it was with Alexander Dugin. It just happened on the 23rd, and I just got the translation for it. Dugin said, and all of this is a quote, "This is a very dangerous war since Russia cannot lose it. This will bring Russia to its end. Russia cannot say, fine, we'll give up the areas we've taken over. Such a thing would lead to a domestic explosion, and Russia would find itself in a civil war. Russia cannot lose under any circumstance, since a single step backward would lead to 1,000 step backwards. Russia will fight to the end because we simply cannot stop. We cannot lose. And we will not be satisfied until Ukraine is fully liberated from the pro-NATO political elites, regardless of the cost. This is what we will consider a victory. Russia itself will not use nuclear weapons, so it has no reason to threaten nuclear war. However, there will be such a threat if Russia begins to lose, and in such a case, Russia may use nuclear weapons. So if Russia is allowed to win the war, this would still constitute a victory for the West and defeat for Russia, except Russia would survive and humanity would be saved. However, in either scenario, there will be no Ukraine. It will disappear if we win, and it will disappear along with all of humanity if a nuclear apocalypse begins. Even if we imagine a Ukrainian victory, after so many people die and the infrastructure is completely destroyed, no one will be ready to rebuild this huge country. Therefore, Ukraine does not actually exist. If only we had refrained from destroying the Soviet Union or had broken the necks of Gorbachev and Yeltsin at the right time. In my opinion, this is Alexander Dugin, on Saudi Arabian television that has just been translated. In my opinion, the West is the source of absolute evil. Now, think. Saudi Arabia is cozying up to whom? China and Russia. They have already dismissed us and anything we claim on OPEC. We are no longer close allies with Saudi Arabia. What have we been saying for the longest time to the left? We've been telling the left forever, why are you in bed with all of these horrible people that are Muslim extremists? Because they'll kill you first. They don't agree with your thing. They don't agree with Jesus, so they'll come for the Christians. But they'll probably kill you first because you are dumping filth into the atmosphere, right? Listen to this. He's telling Saudi Arabian viewers, in my opinion, the West is a source of absolute evil. It uses artificial intelligence to destroy the family, sex, and the nature of human beings. I believe that the Muslims understand me well, because I believe that the West is an antichrist, is the antichrist. Putin does not think so at all. He sees the West as a partner who behaves very aggressively for whatever reason. But now we're at war with the West because its ally decided to fight us. But if the West did not decide to fight us, we would be supplying it with cheap oil and gas. This is apocalyptic kind of language coming from one of the guy who's been described as Putin's brain. Okay? Now, I want to give you just a little thing on just to urge you to understand what we may be facing. I don't want anybody to freak out, but I do want you to be mentally and physically prepared. The Biden administration, when they came into office, they said, we're going to reduce the role of nuclear weapons in the U.S. strategy. Oh, good. Okay, so we're doing that. However, there are now 4 countries all aligned against America and against the West, and all of them pretty evil. Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. Vladimir Putin announced on the 21st that they were suspending the participation in the New START. So there's no arms treaty between the U.S. for the first time since 1972 between the U.S. and Russia. On February 19th, it was reported that the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors caught Iran enriching uranium to 84% purity. You need 90% purity. They say this is, if it hasn't happened yet, we are within days of them being able to enrich plutonium or uranium and getting it to bomb ready. The time to act now against Iran is almost at zero. Okay? Once they can do it, they can do it. Biden administration has been trying to negotiate limits on Iran's nuclear program, but then they started breaking down and cracking down on their protesters. And Biden says he's willing to use force as a last resort, but the moment of last resort is right now. And far as we know, we are not readying any military options. But the Israelis will. Even if they have to go by themselves, they will. On February 18th, North Korea conducted a test of nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missiles. It demonstrated the ability to reach the continental U.S. This is now the 3rd country. We have Iran, and Iran is now in negotiations with Russia to buy the intercontinental ballistic missiles from Russia, and they'll cap them themselves with their atomic bombs. Okay? So now that's 3. North Korea, as this threat grows, the allies of America are now worried about our credibility, and they're now starting to build their own nuclear arsenals. South Koreans are in strong support of building an independent nuclear force. On February 7th, the Pentagon notified Congress that China now has more ICBMs than we do. John F. Kennedy said in 1962, the only way we're safe is if we are bigger and stronger than everyone else. This is what happens when American power is diminished. I've been telling you this for years. The minute America has no credibility, not only will we rapidly come under attack from everybody who's ever hated us, but the world will spiral into chaos. You don't have to just think of, I want to add 2 more things to this pile. And I'm sorry to do this to you. I really am. But it is, I believe, my calling to warn you of what is possibly coming. I can't say this is coming, but I will tell you that at this point, I can't tell whether this is a prompting or not. I can't tell, so I don't know if this is coming from me. And if it's coming from me, it's usually wrong. If it's a prompting, it's never wrong. But I can't tell which it is. But I feel time is running short because we could bomb Israel, not us. Israel could bomb Iran today. And that could start things in motion. So you need to know this. There is a nuclear complex. Do you remember in Ukraine where this nuclear complex came under Russian control for a while, and everybody was worried that they were going to destabilize it and use it and shut it down? Well, unfortunately, we're now starting to consider that that could be a weapon, and not even intentional. But there's a lot of fighting going on around there. If you have a Chernobyl accident from fighting, you could have, it would be just a global catastrophe. But the thing that I know, one other thing besides the nuclear catastrophe. I told you that there was a ammunition storage facility in Moldova, and I've heard several things about it, that it is really bad, holds Soviet-era stuff, and then I've heard that it's really nothing, and they can't be used. But it is the largest depository of old Soviet bombs, et cetera, et cetera. There is a Twitter account, and I am not claiming this to be true. It's called the Open Source Intelligence Monitor, and it has said that the, quote, former military inspectorate of Ministry of Defense of Moldova has said the armed forces of some country I've never heard of have rigged all arms depot within the breakaway region, including the depot, with explosives. So if any military operations begin, it will cause a massive explosion. Keep your eye on Moldova. But here's the thing that you must know. Those are all the possibilities, and they are becoming more and more likely because we are looking so incredibly weak. But one that I can tell you is happening and will happen, and you must prepare your family for this. Russian Defense Ministry, a journal from the Russian Defense Ministry, says Moscow is developing a new type of military strategy using nuclear weapons to protect against possible U.S. aggression. Now, they're saying that they are developing a new strategic response, and they are going with that. However, that's preparing. This is doing. This is from National Review. For the second time in a few weeks, listen to this, a federal law enforcement agency suffered a serious cyber attack, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services warned that Russian-linked ransomware group called CLOP had reportedly taken responsibility for the mass attack on more than 130 organizations, including the healthcare industry. Ransomware attacks are now common as rainstorms. In a busy news cycle, you might not have heard, but two federal law enforcement agencies have had serious cyber attacks this last month. CNN reported that the FBI's New York field office was investigating and working to contain malicious cyber incident, a part of its computer network in recent days, involving computer systems used in investigation of images of child sexual exploitation. Then NBC News reported late yesterday that the U.S. Marshals Service suffered a security breach over a week ago that compromised sensitive information. In a statement Monday, U.S. Marshals Service spokesperson Drew Wade acknowledged the breach, telling NBC News the affected system contains law enforcement sensitive information, including returns from legal processes, administrative information, personally identifiable information pertaining to subjects of the U.S. Marshals investigation, third parties, and employees. Wade said the incident occurred February 17th. So far, there's no indication that the two attacks are connected. However, the cyber hostage-taking ransomware that often strong-arms institutions into making hefty ransom payments to regain access to their computer systems is now a fact of life for U.S. corporations and the government. Last week, the Department of Health and Human Services warned that Russians and Russian-linked ransomware groups like Clop had reportedly taken responsibility for a mass attack on more than 130 organizations, including the healthcare industry. Okay, it goes on to all of this. However, there is something that you need to know that tells you everything. In last summer, I didn't know this, but a team of Russian hackers, known as Cold River, targeted several institutions, including the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories. Now, all of these cyber attacks are connected to Russia one way or another. But if you remember, in June of 2021, Joe Biden met with Vladimir Putin and gave him clear instructions, in fact, gave him a list of critical infrastructure targets that must never be attacked. Of those 16 critical infrastructure sectors, there is public health, emergency services, and energy. Quote, I gave him a list, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have it in front of me, 16 specific entities. 16 defined as critical infrastructure under U.S. policy, from energy to water systems. Of course, the principle is the one thing. It has to be backed up by practice. Responsible countries need to take action against criminals who conduct ransomware activities in their territory. Okay. All right. Is he taking that seriously? No. He has a list. Russian hacker. You don't do this in Russia without Putin. Russian hackers are not being stopped. They may be encouraged. It may be a state operation at arm's length. But we've already warned him. They are increasing. It is now day after day after day. That's the thing that you should worry about, is our critical infrastructure, which our government is doing nothing to prepare. All we're doing is sending our money over to the most corrupt country in the world and making ourselves a bigger target.